WADR. West Africa Democracy Radio.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Senegalese opposition political coalition, Here We As Can We, steps up campaign for Sonko's participation in the 2024 presidential race.
The candidacy of Ousmane Sonko is a political request, a request of the people. It will not depend and it will not depend in any way on a political conspiracy or a judicial conspiracy.
Nigeria's Independent Electoral Commission INEC to prosecute over 200 cases arising from the 2023 general elections.
We are looking at the activities of all actors involved in the election, including some of our high-ranking officials. We are working with the Nigerian Bar Association, the NBA, to prosecute the alleged offenders.
Extrajudicial killings, torture and sexual violence in Cameroon's Anglophone regions persist, says Amnesty International. An alliance of civil society organizations in Ghana request an audit of the power company.
A good policy, but looking at the economy system right now, that tariffs, because our income is low. So if our income is low, how basically are we going to make money to pay those particular tariffs?
I would like to buy it at that price because with the dumso stuff, it will really affect it.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Tofik Abdul Nasser with Newslink.
Thank you for joining us. We begin in Senegal as the opposition political coalition, Here We As Can We, is pressing home its second demand after President Macky Sall's declaration of non-candidacy in the February 2024 elections. President Sall's move has been praised by local and international analysts as a giant leap in restoring peace in one of Africa's modern democracies following a series of violent confrontations. Bloomberg reported late Tuesday that Senegalese international bonds also rallied as investors welcomed President Sall's decision. But it appears there is more that lies ahead as Here We As Can We intensifies its agenda. More details with Imoredet.
The Senegalese opposition coalition Here We As Can We is calling for the release of its presidential candidate in the 2024 race. Ousmane Sonko, whose party, PASTEF, is a member of the coalition, is facing a 2-year jail term from a court ruling on June 1 after he was charged with the offense of corrupting youth. The opposition coalition argues that it had initially announced 2 requests on its agenda since the start of recent protests. First is to prevent President Macky Sall from seeking a 3rd mandate, and the second is for all charges against its leader, Ousmane Sonko, to be dropped. Biram Diop is a member of PASTEF.
The candidacy of Ousmane Sonko is a political request, a request of the people. It will not depend and it will not depend in any way on a political conspiracy or a judicial conspiracy. Ousmane Sonko will be a candidate. We will campaign with him. He will take his program, and if our wish is accepted by the good Lord, he will be president in 2024.
But can Sonko's case be settled politically? Awadousi Albert is a political analyst.
It's possible to find a consensus. The national dialogue has opened up avenues, and I don't see why not. Even the president himself has said that he's extending his hand to everyone. Now, it is also true that Here We As Can We must be up to the task of appeasement. We have to get out of this very tense cycle to engage in a much more peaceful presidential election.
In the meantime, Senegal's ruling Benno Bokk Yakaar coalition has yet to nominate a presidential candidate, but commentators say they will have the edge in the February vote as Sonko faces disqualification. By August, however, the main challenges are expected to emerge because they are required to submit signatures from at least 0.8% of voters. Among the contenders to succeed Sall is Idrissa Seck, the runner-up in Senegal's 2019 election, who stepped down from a government role in April. Two other potential candidates, former Dakar Mayor Khalifa Sall and Karim Wade, could regain eligibility after a political committee set up by Sall said it was in favor of modifying the electoral law. Wade and Sall were both disqualified from the 2019 vote after they were handed jail sentences for embezzlement and corruption, respectively.
Imoradet reporting there. The Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) of Nigeria has acknowledged the challenges it faced in conducting the 2023 general elections. Despite these difficulties, INEC claims it deserves a commendation for the successes achieved during the poll, stating that the era of single-party dominance in national policies is likely over. INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu made the remarks during a meeting with resident electoral commissioners to begin the review process for the 2023 election. WADR's Usman Umar in Abuja tells us more.
Yakubu revealed that the commission has assembled a team of 427 lawyers to prosecute 215 electoral offenders pro bono. He also disclosed that INEC has partnered with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission to address violations such as vote buying.
We are presently looking at all the evidence of infractions during the election, including the prosecution of electoral offenders. We are looking at the activities of all actors involved in the election, including some of our high-ranking officials. I can also confirm that we have received 215 case files from the Nigeria Police following their arrest and the conclusion of investigation into electoral offenses arising from the 2023 general election. We are working with the Nigerian Bar Association, the NBA, to prosecute the alleged offenders.
The election chair, Yakubu, emphasized that the election was a fair reflection of Nigeria's multi-party democracy, despite divergent opinions about the outcome, adding that the Commission is now conducting a post-election review to identify and address structural, infrastructural, and human challenges encountered during the process.
In some states around the country, different political parties control the legislative and executive arms of government. What is clear from these records also is that the days of single-party dominance of our national politics are probably gone. Furthermore, many prominent candidates lost in the constituencies they contested, and political parties lost in some of their presumed strongholds.
Yakubu explains that INEC did not engage directly with critics immediately after the election, but chose to listen, draw lessons, and conduct an impartial review process. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
And now, a new report by a rights group indicates that killings, torture, and sexual violence perpetrated by the army, separatists, and militia against civilians in Cameroon's English-speaking regions persist. Amnesty International, in a report Tuesday, said it collected testimonies from more than 100 victims of armed violence amid clashes between the Federal Army and separatist rebels. The report also documented extrajudicial killings and the burning of homes and villages in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon over the past 3 years. Oge Obi-Erika completes the story.
The authors of the report said they interviewed 15 women who survived sexual violence at the hands of security forces. While the Anglophone crisis is rooted in colonial-era tensions, intercommunal conflicts have exacerbated the fighting, resulting in over 4,000 deaths and nearly 1 million displacements. Separatist groups are known to target the Mbororo Fulani, a semi-nomadic group, which the Cameroonian military reportedly recruited from members of a vigilante group to help fight separatists. This measure, however, affects civilians because, according to testimonies, the militias are very hostile to the population, committing acts such as rape, torture, and other atrocities. Fabian Offner, a senior researcher for Amnesty International, laments that nobody is taking the situation seriously regarding the scale of the human rights violations committed. In the past 2 months alone, 30 women and girls were raped by security forces or members of armed groups, Amnesty reported. The rights group argues that the Cameroonian government has fallen far short of its responsibility to investigate well-documented accusations of abuse and hold perpetrators to account. The protracted armed conflict known as the Anglophone Crisis began in 2016 when English-speaking teachers and lawyers organized protests against professional and political marginalization by the majority French-speaking government.
Okay, Erika found that report. In Ghana, the Alliance of Civil Society Organizations working on extractives, anti-corruption and good governance has called on the electricity company, ECG, to conduct a thorough audit and streamline their activities. This call comes after the Chamber of Independent Power Producers, which controls over 65% of the available thermal generation capacity, threatened a shutdown of its power plant over a debt of $1.7 billion owed them by ECG. Only recently, it was revealed that Ghana's electricity company loses 30% of the power given to it to distribute due to technical and commercial anomalies, translating to a loss of 30 cents on each dollar of power received. From Accra, Atiwin Imbelalosin reports.
The continued losses by the Electricity Company of Ghana has placed the power company in debt distress as it now owes the Independent Power Producers, IPPs, $1.7 billion. Recall that the IPPs and distributors had on May 28 threatened to cut power supply to the national grid by the end of June 2023 if the government failed to settle its debt. However, on June 30, the IPPs announced the suspension of the planned shutdown of power plants following a fruitful engagement with the ECG. The Alliance of Civil Society Organizations, CSOs working on extractives, anti-corruption and good governance, says the leakages must be identified and plugged. Dr. Steve Mantiao is the group's spokesperson.
The ECG will need to do much more to reduce commercial losses. I mean, not all the customers are captured in their database. I know they are doing something about it, but they need to expedite action to ensure that they are able to capture all consumers into their database. They need to be able to standardize all meters to ensure that they don't get shortchanged.
Reacting to the news of a possible upward review of taxes to clear some of these energy debts, some Ghanaians spoke to WADR on how the possible uptake in electricity tariffs will impact them.
A good policy, but looking at the economy system right now, that tariffs, because our income is low. So if our income is low, how basically are we going to make money to pay those particular tariffs?
I would like to buy it at that price because with the dumso stuff, it will really affect us. So if there's light and amount is going to be increased or what, we will just have to try and comply with it more than us going back to our dumso life. No.
As part of the understanding reached, all IPPs have received an offer of payments from the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, to enable them operate in the interim, a grace period for the government of Ghana to address the outstanding arrears in the energy sector. Reporting for Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Imbila Lawson in Accra.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegalese opposition political coalition, Here We As Can We, steps up campaign for Sonko's participation in the 2024 presidential race. Nigeria's Independent Electoral Commission (INEC) to prosecute over 200 cases arising from the 2023 general elections. Extrajudicial killings, torture and sexual violence in Cameroon's Anglophone regions persist, says Amnesty International. An alliance of civil society organizations in Ghana request an audit of the power company. Still ahead is the press review, guest interview and sports. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
The Chadian interim government has established a new commission in charge of the implementation of disarmament, demobilization and reintegration of combatants of armed groups. The body, established under a decree signed May 31, 2023, has a whole new working structural organization and takes more responsibility from the former, recently dissolved by the government. Francis Boniface has more.
Under the terms of the new decree, the Commission assumes the overall responsibility for the implementation of the disarmament, demobilization and reintegration process, DDR. Its missions include making an inventory of the political military groups and ensuring the collection, documentation as well as control of weapons, ammunition, vehicles and military equipment. Other functions the presidencies say are to assess the nature of the needs of demobilized soldiers, define the form of transitional assistance aimed at meeting the immediate needs of ex-combatants, design the DDR program, and evaluate its costs for its implementation. Under the supervision of the Transitional Prime Minister, the Commission will be assisted by a technical committee in charge of preparing and organizing the DDR program. The establishment of this commission is a major step in the implementation of the Doha Peace Agreement signed on August 8, 2022, between the Chadian government and the political military groups. The agreement provides for a ceasefire and a DDR program, allowing representatives of armed groups such as FACT behind the death of President Idris Deby Itno in 2021 to take part in the sovereign inclusive national dialogue.
Francis Boniface with that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
From Banjul, here is Sankule Janko with the major headlines from the Gambian dailies.
Hello there and welcome to this edition of the Press Review, coming to you from Banjul, the Gambia. Let's begin with the Point newspaper, and I'll tell you this. Although Maki's decision was taken in Senegal, but it has a lot of impact in this country, the Gambia. Because the Point's lead story this morning reads, UDP hails Maki's democratic stance, with the photo of President Macky Sall as well as the leading opposition United Democratic Party's leader, lawyer Ousseynou Dabo. The opposition party has really hailed Macky Sall for deciding not to contest a third term in the 2024 presidential elections in Senegal. Barrow reacts to Maki's decision. That's another story on the Point newspaper. Information is lifeblood of democracy, Information Minister states. 63 intended migrants concealed release on bail. Of course, this is a story you heard on WADR yesterday. Ambassador Ba and 15 U.S. doctors discuss strengthening medical assistance to Gambia. Man found guilty of murdering mom and daughters in fire. Assembly confirmed delivery of vehicles procured for NAMS. Let's move on to the Standard newspaper. Just as it was a lead story on the Point newspaper, the Standard's also lead story has to do with Macky somehow, because the lead story reads, pressure on Barrow to do as Macky. Information Minister, however, says the two cases are not related. Well, that is what the Information Minister says, that the two cases are not related. I guess the difference is Senegal has a term limit while the Gambia does not have a term limit. But then, whatever the case is, Macky's decision has been really hailed by so many people in this part of Africa. UDP commends Macky Sall on decision to quit. That's another story, of course, on the Standard newspaper. Man arraigned for threatening to kill burn down family compound. Man found guilty of killing Gambian family in UK. NPP scolds Esafal for proposing opposition coalition talks. This story, of course, you've also had this on WADR, and it says Assembly breaks silence on controversial vehicle purchase. Ukraine invites Gambia to support its peace formula. Now, let's move on to the Fourier newspaper. The Fourier's lead story today reads, National Assembly Agriculture Committee recommends prosecution for default contractors. And the story about the National Assembly and the vehicle purchasing is actually also carried by the Fourier newspaper, and it reads, Clerk's office clarifies vehicle loan scheme for National Assembly members. Man pleads for return of bikes seized by Senegalese soldiers, according to this story. These are the major stories making the headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studios.
Sankule Janko there with the press review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In the wake of President Macky Sall's declaration of non-candidacy for the February 2024 elections, the opposition political coalition Yewi as Can We has moved forward with its second demand. This decision by President Sall has been widely applauded by local and international analysts as a significant step towards restoring peace in one of Africa's modern democracies, which has been marred by violent confrontations in the past. However, it seems Yewi as Can We is not done yet and is determined to push forward with its agenda. To shed light on the reasons behind Yewi as Can We's call for further action, we turn to Ibrahim Akan, a governance expert. He began by acknowledging the head of state's decision to withdraw from the race in 2024.
I think it's message in West Africa, on the continent, to leaders who wants to stay years in power. As you know, there are two presidents in Africa who have been in power for almost 40 years. So I think it's really a good sign that democracy is somehow developing on the continent, and then people understand the need for changes from time to time at the head of the state, and that will be a very good thing for West Africa, but also for the democracy in Senegal.
So now that President Sall has ruled out third-term candidacy as expected, Sonko's issue is also pending. Do you think Sonko's issue can also be resolved politically?
Well, it depends on the way Macky Sall wants to end his presidency. You know, in his speech, he was very strong in condemning the violence that occurred at the beginning of June, the death of people, and also the fact that there are groups who are really not only violent, but who really want to destroy everything. He was violent, and everybody knew that those information was directed to Sonko and his people. But at the same time, in his speech, he was also saying that he hoped that people will come down, people will realize that we need to strengthen the Senegalese democracy, and we need to make sure that what we leave for our children and our grandchildren will be something, and we will continue, step by step to really strengthen that democracy. So if that is the spirit in which he made his statement, I think there will be room for conversation with Sonko, not only about the cases against him, but also about his participation to the election, because I think the biggest problem now, after sorted out the third term issue, is how to handle Sonko's problem.
Right. So, right after Macky Sall's declaration, F24 organized a press conference, and then also Yewi as Can We have also organized a press conference talking about the Sonko issue. And many have argued that the reasons for these conferences is because they don't want the justice system to jail Sonko, which might not make him eligible for the coming election. Are you of the same view?
Macky Sall is well known during his presidency as a man who was really trying to identify people who were supposed to be very good candidate for the election and to eliminate them. He eliminated Abdoulaye Wade's son, he eliminated Khalifa Sall, and Sonko is the only one who resisted to that strategy. I think the fact that now he's no longer running makes that strategy very weak. Yes, there are cases against Sonko. Yes, there is this inquiry that he said about the event of June. But at the end of the day, all these cases I don't think will be final before February 2024. It's really important that this election be very inclusive, and really good that this election will set a path for the reconciliation of Senegalese. We were very, very divided before the speech.
Ibrahim Akan is a governance expert. In sports, Tunisian star Ons Jabeur has reached the second round in Wimbledon 2023 after a win against Poland's Magdalena Fetch. The Tunisian sensation beat the Poles 6-3-0 in straight set to progress to the next round. Ons is hoping to go one step further following her 2022 Wimbledon defeat in the final against Kazakhstan's Elena Rybakina in her first slam final in 2022. The world number 6 Jabeur would take on Yaselina Bonaventure of Belgium or China's Zhuzhan Bai in the second round. In football, Morocco has secured a place in Paris 2024 Olympics after a 4-3 penalty shootout win against Mali in the semi-final on Tuesday night. The thrilling encounter ended 2-2 regularly time before the host country snatched the victory in a dramatic fashion. Meanwhile, Egypt are one more step closer to retaining their Under-23 Africa Cup of Nations title after a hard-fought 1-0 win against Guinea on Tuesday. Midfielder Mohamed Shehata scored the winner with a thunderous strike from outside the area after just 8 minutes, earning them the victory. The win has also earned the Pharaohs place in the 2024 Paris Olympics. And that's it for sports. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. In Ghana, on Royals FM 104.7, when Christian Mukidi has been on the console, and Mahmoud Jova has been streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Do interact with us via social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I am Tofik Abdul Nasir. Good afternoon.
Talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.